Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. So today we've put together a workshop on immersive journalism, that is journalism using techniques in virtual reality. As you'll see from our two panelists today, the technology is still nascent in its infancy, but it's already had a lot of, drawn a lot of attention and interest and produced some pretty dramatic results, as you'll see. And so it's attracted the interest of both independent production groups and mainstream news organizations. And as we'll talk about, the technology is available, not only do we have things like the Oculus Rift, which has to run off of a fairly large machine, but you also have, more recently, simple devices such as headsets that you attach to your phone. And so we have a series of those, cardboard and foam headsets, and we have another one put out by Zeiss. And so these enable people basically to just download an app on their phone and watch a virtual news report. So the technology exists on a lot of different levels. It's becoming more and more functional and accessible. So we want to think not only about the effects of this kind of storytelling, but the implications for the broader development of this kind of technology as a way of narrative construction. So with that, I'd like to introduce our two panelists, Dan and Nonny. And so Nonny is going to speak first, and Nonny is the CEO of Emblematic Group and an Annenberg Fellow at USC. And she has been described as one of the 13 people who made the world more creative by Fast Company. She's an AP Google Technology and Journalism Scholar and Tribeca New Media winner. And she's pioneering the use of virtual reality to make fully immersive experiences of the news. And she is going to talk about her various projects for us now.
Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and launch in. I didn't recheck the audio, but hopefully it's not going to be a problem.
Do you hear me now, Nonny? Nice to meet you. Molt de gust. Welcome to Barcelona. Benvinguda a Barcelona. I don't know, Nonny, if I could ask you to raise your arms. A veure si pot aixecar els braços. Ja veieu que els aixeca. Keep them up, because now we'll show the robot. I ara anirem a veure el robot, que ja veieu. Can you move them a little bit more? A veure si els pot moure una mica més. Up and down. Doncs ja veieu que el robot reacciona perfectament amb la Nonny. Nonny, I'm ready to interview you now for a few minutes. Li farem una entrevista a la Nonny per veure què li ha semblat aquesta experiència. You're a journalist, ella és una periodista, i fa una estona ha entrevistat un científic de Barcelona. You just interviewed a researcher from Barcelona, but in a body of a robot. What was that experience like?
So for me, it starts to feel very natural after a while. Occasionally, there's been problems with the eye movement, and if I move too fast. But beyond that, very quickly, I'm there in Barcelona with you.
So, how did I end up in two places at once, right? How many here are familiar with the book Rape in Cyberspace? I always kind of go back to this because a lot of audience have forgotten about this story, which I think is really important. And it was a text-based online world, essentially, and somebody hacked in and started raping the women through the text. And the women were extremely upset about this, right? And here it was just like a text-based representation of themselves, and yet they actually felt like they've been raped, right? And why does this happen? It's because a digital sense of presence is actually incredibly powerful. Researchers Mel Slater and Maria Sanchez-Vives, who I did the Barcelona project with and other things, call it rare response as if real. In this photograph here, you can see that, I think my images are they were bigger before, but never mind. You can see that he is seeing himself from behind. The goggles he's wearing go straight into that video camera. And interestingly, he feels like he's where he is seeing himself rather than where his body is, even though he can actually see his own body. And when they bring a hammer down in front of the video camera, he jumps, because that's where he identifies himself physically, even though his body is several feet ahead of him, right? So we're hardwired to adopt these representations of ourselves as real. And I started using something called immersive journalism as a novel way to utilize gaming platforms and virtual environments to convey news, documentary, and nonfiction stories. This uses puts the audience at a virtual reconstruction of the scene, and it uses visual and audio material from boots on the ground investigative journalism. Same thing that you would do normally, same reporting, gathering of audio, video, etc. And then I'd use a sense of presence to modify this regular journalism and bring it into the virtual world and make you feel like you're actually on scene, and it really can be quite effective. Essentially, this is not a new idea. Martha Gellhorn, who wrote during, was a reporter during World War II, she called it the view from the ground. She wanted you to feel like you were there, present on scene. And then Walter Cronkite made a series of films called You Are There. Oh, okay, hang on, guys. I'm just going to escape for 1 second. Sorry, and all that time, and then we ended up doing something a little bit different than this. This has got the one. It's got all the videos already linked. After all that, got it all ready, and then the wrong one in the end. Sorry. I'm going to come back to this in 1 second. Okay. So I showed you this video, and of ourselves is real, and I'm going to back up one more time on this thing because I think you guys will find this interesting. I had done a study on sexual harassment and gender swapping in Second Life, and I was really interested in the sexual harassment issue in general, and I was looking at whether data was similar to what we're seeing in the offline world, which is women find a situation more harassing than men, and you go into bulletin boards, and the studies indicate the same, and I was curious about this in Second Life. And so what does this sort of look like? What does harassment look like in a thing called in like Second Life? People would attach giant penises. They would use the same sort of text-based raping as a rape in cyberspace. And then here's a video which shows how this works. Come on. Here's like a flying penis that comes after you, right? Now I know what my kids were. So you get the idea, right? What does sexual harassment look like? But here's the deal: when we took this data, we looked at how did women who were playing with women avatars and how did men who were playing with male avatars feel, and then we went on to look at how did men who used female avatars feel. So we found that women with women avatars felt the same way as men did. And we found that, males, just didn't feel as harassed unless they played with the female avatar, in which case men playing as women felt more harassed than the women did, right? Now, because I initially was just looking at sexual harassment in general, I didn't ask the question why, right? And it was only afterwards when I collected the data that I realized I had enough there to investigate this other issue. And of course, we can spend a lot of time talking about sexual harassment in all kinds of environments, which I'm not going to do. But the crucial thing is, here are guys playing female with a female avatar, and yet that digital representation of themselves is so valuable, even when they've got a different gender, that they're going to feel the sense of harassment, right? And I think that's the key point to be keeping in mind about why we talk about presence and stuff. So, and I talked about this already. I'm going to skip ahead now. Sorry, I pulled up the wrong presentation, which is couldn't tell why I was cut off before. Now I know. So, not a new idea. Walter Cronkite, one of our most famous broadcasters, had a series of films that he called You Are There, and here we
These
go.
Texians, as they are called, are Mexican citizens. Their province is part of the Mexican nation, but their difficulties with the central government have steadily increased. Now there is open rebellion.
March 5th, 1836. The siege of the Alamo. You are there.
So basically, Cronkite tried to command you to be there, right? Now you know where that voice came from too, right? So it's, like I said, not a new idea. And when George Pimplin wrote his book about the Paper Lion, he was giving this, immersion journalism example of like what would the average guy's experience be like if he went to go join a football team. Early on in web journalism, you had people like Jonathan Dube putting audio from subway to text and photographs and saying that this was, immersive storytelling, and that it was going to be a better way to begin to connect a story. Documentary Games was also wrestling with how do we do these nonfiction stories. Anybody here familiar with JFK Reloaded? Yes. So that's basically where you play the shooter from the book depository. So, like, could somebody actually make the shot? And this is how they were doing with the whole conspiracy theories of like all the different things. And what they did was kept the game up until somebody actually made the shot, and then they removed the game to make a point. During the George Bush John Kerry campaign, in which Kerry was being accused of not deserving the Swift Vote Medal, Kim Awards, which does a lot of reenactment, used an example to let you play John Kerry and see if he actually deserved his medal. Finally, one of the most controversial ones was 9/11 Survivor, and which you just played a victim, more or less. And these guys will tell about how they were in San Diego, and they were gaming, and it was 3 in the morning, and they were watching people jump from the buildings, and they were trying to make sense from it. So they took a game engine, and they stripped out all the fighting and the bullets and the weapons, and they hacked in to make this piece. They were sued by the game company and had to pay $30,000. But as one of the other developers said, the game itself is not really a game at all. It keeps no score, actual track of time. It is merely a moment caught in time. And I think that's what we try as journalists to do. So one of my earliest pieces, I had done a documentary film called Unconstitutional about all the civil liberties issues post 9/11. And I had a big section on Guantanamo Bay. That film was made in 2003, released in 2004. And I got a MacArthur funding to bring it up into Second Life. Ultimately, it was rebuilt in Unity for the Moscow Museum of Modern Art. But the idea is that it's rather than a place that was off limits to most citizens and press, I made a virtual but accessible Guantanamo Bay prison. And it was pretty successful. People would just show up there from around the world, kind of trying to check out what the prison was about. Again, we tried to rely on very careful journalistic practice to make the piece. Here's a photograph of a guy who, an army soldier smuggled out of how detainees were being brought to Gitmo, and this is the sort of thing that's happening in our build. And again, I showed
As soon as I had put on my orange jumpsuit, I was thrown into the back of a C-17 transport plane, and
you are immediately bound, and then a black hood comes over the vision of your avatar. Shut up! We then integrated some sounds that were based on descriptions of what real detainees heard. When the black hood is removed, you find that you're in a cage. Most of the footage is from original Defense Department shots of detainees in Guantanamo Bay.
A replica of Camp Delta will be added to this Camp X-Ray soon. Nonny wants it to include a habeas corpus game, enhancing the simulation of a place outside of the law.
Like a regular video game where you get your choices. What do you do now? Call your parents? Call your lawyer? Ask what you're in here for? And the answers are, no, you can't call your parents. No, you can't call your lawyer. Sorry, not allowed to give you that information.
During this period of time when I was making this film, I also had collected a lot of Freedom of Information Act documents on detainees being kept in stress positions. And you read these stories, oh, they've been in a stress position for 5 hours or 8 hours or 9 hours, and what did that really mean? So we took the interrogation logs of Al-Qahtani, who the Bush administration said had been tortured, and we built a VR piece, which we were calling, mostly head-mounted displays in. And the goggles you're going to see were called the Wide 5, which were the predecessor to the Oculus Rift. We'll talk about that in a minute.
On this head-mounted display, if this is uncomfortable, tell me. Alright.
So you can see that your head turns when you head, and he's breathing at the same time as you are, because the people are wearing a breathing strap to make sure the breathing would match with the virtual avatar. And you look down, and your knees are up. So there you can see this way people were sitting when they went through it. You can see the breathing strap. They're actually sitting upright. But when we asked people what was their body like afterwards, they all reported that they were hunched over in a stress position. And that was really a big aha moment for me, about how VR goggles could just really create this embodied sensation. Of course, brought a lot of questions to mind of, does this raise questions about journalistic integrity if you're giving people a subjective experience through these sort of things. So I think we actually did a pretty good job, and this video came out after we made our piece.
Wow.
we had the logs said things like, the sergeant told the detainee to sit down and stand up 3 times, and so we had to change the actor to read it, sit down, stand up, right? But you can see, we never used the F word, but you can see that was probably the more likely way that this was being held up. And I would say that our piece was actually pretty ethical considering what we were trying to do. Then as part of a USC endeavor called Hunger in the Golden State, which did a lot of what I would consider now traditional reporting, photographs, audio, video on the web, I wanted to build a VR piece. And we went out and started capturing audio at food banks, and to look at how overstrained food banks were. On the left you can see is a real food bank line. An intern and I were out recording many hours of audio just like you would in any journalistic piece. And on the right was the virtual humans that I used. And I can tell you that I built this piece for about $700 my own money, because at the time people thought I was insane. You're doing journalism and virtual reality, and so I had 0 funding, and I just needed to prove to people that this was a powerful place. And again, a video which might give you an idea of what went on.
Slowing down because there are too many people in the room. What's the next number? Okay. Why are you here? You shouldn't be standing here. No, you're blocking the... You should be in line where your number is. Please don't push. Okay, we're slowing down a little bit. There's too many people. There's too many people. Somebody just push. Okay, he's having a seizure. Okay.
You can see where the guy on the left is going through this. The person is very real. He's going to be very careful not to step on him when he stands up. He's going to walk around the body. And he's wearing an early duct tape version of goggles. No, you get the idea. So it ended up going to Sundance, and what you saw over and over were people around the guy, again, trying to see him. And this was the reaction, which I didn't know what was going to happen when I brought it there.
What do you think?
Opening night.
Oh, you're crying. You're crying. Gina, you're crying.
So you can see I'm like, oh my God, what did I just do to you? And I have to say it was astonishing, where we were ending up with 3-hour wait lines and working maybe 8 hours, and we were there for 13 hours, et cetera, et cetera. And it just, the impact was incredible. Those goggles, what had happened was we only had one version of that wide 5 that I mentioned in the lab, and we're going up to Sundance, and they were worth like $50,000, and we weren't allowed to bring them with us. So at that moment, there were a couple interesting people working there, including Palmer Luckey, who'd managed to kind of be the intern lab assistant, and was being pushed to make, once we couldn't take the wide 5 and had gotten into Sundance, we had to take goggles. And along with several other people in the lab, some unsung heroes who did the coding really for this, these were the goggles that went with us. You can see their duct tape, and you can kind of read in the bottom, Palmer Luckey. So 9 months later, this is Palmer, crashed in my hotel room at Sundance. And so 9 months later was the Kickstarter for Oculus Rift, and I think most people know at this point that about that last spring Facebook bought Oculus Rift for $2 billion, and he hadn't yet hit 21 years of age. I went on then to make a piece called Use of Force. Tells the story of a man named Anastasio Hernandez Rojas, and he was a guy brought to the U.S. As a young man, as a teenager, young teenager, and lived in the U.S. without being in any kind of trouble for 27 years. And then during the downturn, he had no papers. He stole a bottle of tequila and steak for his wife on Mother's Day. Was arrested, deported, tried to sneak back in the country, and a border patrol officer roughed him up, and he complained to the supervisor. And rather than the supervisor doing anything about it, he sent him off with the same officer and several officers to this dark pen where they eventually beat and they tased him to death. So what we had were a couple of grainy videos that came like this, with this audio that's pretty terrible. Meaning terrible in content, even with the lack of quality of the audio. I have to escape for this, because for some reason this BuzzFeed video just will not embed. So we went to BuzzFeed and they set it up, and it was sort of an interesting thing that came out of it.
I don't even know what these are. I guess cameras?
Looks like somebody's gonna shock me.
That guy's holding a lightsaber back there. I think virtual reality really is like the next big thing. I think it's the new video game or whatever that means.
It's so weird. There's like all these people and I'm like, what is about to happen?
How's this look with my hair? Pretty good, right?
Oh, got it. Whoa!
This is going to simulate a cell phone, so it's going to be when you press this button here,
Yeah.
and you hold it up in front of you, a cell phone will appear, and you'll have 60 seconds to record whatever you want before your battery dies.
Oh, I see. Oh my god. That's even crazier.
Alright, so there's a bunch of cops here. They're like standing around, something's going on.
Oh, right here. That's not cool.
On the other side of a fence, there's all these people just like kicking and beating this man, and he's screaming.
Look at this. And nobody's doing anything about it. Of course nobody's doing anything about it, right? Of course. Because that's what people do, they just watch. It's kind of messed up.
Oh, here we go.
I couldn't tell before, but I think he's handcuffed.
I'm looking above. I'm seeing the horror.
Hey! We're recording you!
Already not moving, but there's like 5 dudes beating him.
Same thing, they just are not stopping. I don't know, I mean, I can't believe that like is real.
Did not expect a recreation of a real life beating. I thought it was going to be some sort of possibly some entertaining game. That was not the case. You feel kind of like helpless and isolated.
Hopefully in that situation you actually would be able to like somehow stop it, but I do think like the next best thing is recording it.
And I wonder what I would really do. Like, I know you want to say stuff, it's okay to say stuff, but it's like, I don't have the power to go and arrest the police. Maybe that's problematic.
I think when you see something like that, you're like, wow, that was horrible, but at least like the one comfort that I have is like the United States justice system will do something about it, and like people that do bad things get punished for that. And then like what we've been seeing the past few weeks is like sometimes that doesn't happen.
The thing that was really sort of disorienting is that it wasn't one cop doing it and his partner, it was all these other cops sort of standing around and watching.
I think every police officer in the United States probably needs to experience what I just experienced.
I think everyone should give this a shot. And it should not only be for entertainment. I think there should be a whole universe of stuff that we can use this for. And this is definitely something I didn't consider at all. And it's really effective.
So we've got like something like getting close to 600,000 views on the web from this, and a huge amount of dialogue about race in America going back and forth on YouTube with people, so it's kind of an interesting thinking about like that story, which didn't get, I gotta make my PowerPoint, didn't get a lot of play in regular press, ends up in BuzzFeed, and we end up getting a lot of attention to the story. And just to note, this woman, she was the one who got the video from above that we used, so that shows how many officers were actually involved. And I brought her to my lab, and I scanned her and made a real model of her, so that and I motion captured her, reenacting our own memory of the night, so the recreation is actually from her position, her own perspective, rather than me saying, okay, what happened that night as a filmmaker or whatever, and then trying to do something arty about the recreation or whatever. And again, it's up from above, and you can see these people are trying to lean over an edge, even though they can see that they're not anywhere near an edge, which is pretty amazing. I'm going to quickly run through this last piece on Project Syria. Again, showing videos is the best thing to show. piece was commissioned by the World Economic Forum for last year's Davos, and again, we tried to get the kids that, not only did we use archive footage like that, but I also sent a team to the border of Syria and Iraq to capture material of children, particularly in camps, an area that I wouldn't send people now because ISIS is very strong there now. But we tried to take real photographs of kids and put them in it themselves. At the World Economic Forum, we had everybody from Peter Gabriel to John McCain go through. The Syrian contingent was fabulous. It went on to the Victorian Albert Museum, and why this is important is it had a 5-day run with absolutely no press, so anybody who saw it just happened to wander in off the street, and it was kind of, amazingly, was that we had 54 pages of guest book notes of comments from people, and you know, none of the people came for a VR piece, they just happened to come in, and the curators told me that it was the most amazing outpouring of notes they'd ever seen. And to finish up, we also do some kind of fun ones too. We did a Formula One event which let you be in the pit crew and then be at a crash, again emulating a real story. And of course, here's a kid in it, and I just like to show this because it's kind of a mark of showing how immersive it is, right? This is so cool, right? Marker things. So that's kind of it. This is so cool. It's some of the coolest stuff you can be doing, and I think that it's a really interesting place to think about telling these stories in the future.
Okay, so next up we have Dan Pacheco, who's the Peter Horvitz Endowed Chair in Journalism Innovation at the Newhouse School, with the charge of exploring the intersection of journalism and technology. He's a digital journalist with 20 years of experience, and he's worked at the Washington Post, America Online, his own startup, and he's a past recipient of a Knight Challenge Award, the NAA's 20 Under 40, and 2 Knight-Batten Awards for innovation in journalism. In the summer of 2014, he participated as a digital innovator in residence on a Gannet project called Harvest of Change, which used VR and 360 video to allow people to experience a story about how rapid changes in technology are affecting the U.S. agriculture business. And we'll talk about that now.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Well, it's really hard to follow Nonny. I think she was, I'm like really inspired by her. In fact, I sometimes think of her as the drug pusher who introduced me to VR, and now I'm out here pushing it on other people. We've known each other for a while. I want to just kind of like take a step back to see, to talk about kind of where I see virtual reality in the place of other media, and why it's such a it's so significant. So you kind of look at chapter 1 of media. It's all about one-way communication, right? So with Gutenberg, press, you could finally get text out to thousands of people, and that was 1436. And it really wasn't until hundreds of years later that there was another major sea change in how you can get information to the mass market, which was, in this case, radio. So it wasn't, 1919. Then, okay, you could actually transmit your spoken words. A lot of time passed there, and then you're looking at a much shorter period of time to when, okay, now we could send videos to each other, right, through the first television broadcasts. What's starting to happen now, obviously, is things are speeding up. So, chapter 2, we've seen really from the 80s until I think, right around today, everything from CD-ROMs up to the internet, being able to take all types of media, package them together, audio, video, text, etc., visual, and then now we can carry, it's out on the internet. Now we can carry the internet in our pockets. Who knows? Maybe it moves into our bodies next. We're all kind of becoming, cyborgs. But you're looking at a very short period of time there, right? So that's about, roughly, there's a lot of math people here, 20 years-ish. Now I think we're entering chapter 3. And I say this because I think that this isn't just about, oh, what's the next new gadget to come into town? Oh, virtual reality. I think this is really, such a significant event in the expansion of media, and I call it experiential media. So looking at 579 years after Gutenberg, you can now jump inside a story, interact with an environment in full 360, and in 3D, like Nonny was showing many examples, and she's really the godmother of VR. I think Gadget said, true. I think this is the way that I feel when I go through these experiences. We actually have a number of them that you can try yourself. I feel like your consciousness is being transported somewhere else. And we're having to come up with totally new vocabulary to explain what it is that we're feeling in these experiences, and these new types of media experiences. And as you can see, it's extremely powerful. You know, you can really not just hear about what it would be like, you know, what people in Guantanamo are dealing with, but experience it, right? That's a new type of information that we can give somebody. So in some sense, it's kind of like the holodeck in Star Trek, where Commander Riker walks in and he's got the arch, and then it disappears, and then suddenly you feel like you're somewhere else. But I think it's not really, there are a lot of entertainment uses for this, but it's really, from the journalistic perspective, there are totally different things that we can do now. So, you know, we don't have to stop at just writing or showing the story of, in this case, an artist. I was talking to some artists with a PowerPoint. But you can transport somebody into a scene. So another term I heard for what this is 3D transportation, right? So you kind of have to pull all your Star Trek lexicon into the space in a lot of ways. You can also move from taking 2D photos to taking 3D scans of people. So I'm just going to take a quick detour here. I want to show you, and it'll be a little bit hard for those on YouTube to see, but this is something called a structure sensor. It's $350, which means then I put it in my lab. I have a collection of things like that I call the digital petting zoo, and I make them available to students to put their hands on and just see what they can do with it. This is a scan I just did of my colleague over here, Professor Ken Harper, about 15 minutes ago. You can see I have his structural data. So just to show you how easy this is, who would be interested in getting a 3D selfie of themselves? You can print them out too, by the way. Raise your hand if you're interested. Come on.
I'll do it.
All right.
Sure.
And you are?
I'm Ed Felton.
Ed Felton? All right. Come on, Ed.
Hey.
So you might want to turn the lights on real quick up here, very quickly. So just to show you how easy it is, I've now done hundreds of these. I simply turn this on, I click start. You're going to start seeing what looks like a clay version of Ed showing up in real time. All right, you can do this anywhere. So I've been doing this in everywhere from art galleries to just people on the streets and coffee shops, and it's a new way to get it's a new tool for the journalists. I'm just have to start over. Right. The space is a little small. Sometimes the tracking is.
So instead of that incredibly expensive scan that I did of this woman and had to fly her in and really expensive things, this is the sort of thing we'll be able to do on the fly. Just get the people, get our, whoever we're reporting on or, about. We scan them and you put them in the stories themselves. And you'll be doing that with environments.
Exactly. So now we see that Ed is queued up to render. He's being sent up to a private cloud. Will be computed, and a little bit later we'll be able to actually put him into a scene.
Excellent.
But that's, it's beyond just really cool and incredible when you think about it, that we can get structural data from our environment that easily and cheaply. But I think it could be really powerful, and I think we're not that far away. And I'm sure that there's some people here, and probably know a little bit more about this than I, because I heard some developers out in the hallway talking some quite some serious shop talk about servers and things like that. But I kind of see the structural sensors that are sending infrared data out coming back. We're not far from those being in every camera, in every phone, right? So that you're not just getting visual data, and every camera will be structural, and not just for stills, but for video. And just one last.
And imagine the Boston Marathon bombing, right? And
Exactly.
somebody would just be there and quickly scan it up, and you'd be able to get it right away. Within minutes, you'd have the whole landscape scanned.
So speaking of the whole landscape, again, this is going to be not super ideal, but I want you to try to see what's happening on the screen. I'm now in the room scanning mode. You can see it's turning this entire room into polygons. All right, in real time. So now I'm getting all the sandwiches over there, these bags. We have to treat this kind of like 18th century, or actually 19th century photo, so nobody move. Right? Stand really still and look serious. It's like it's like we're back to those days again. So I'm going around and just basically kind of painting this, and within seconds, actually. It creates a 3D model, and I can move through it. So I'm going to pass this around so people can kind of give it a try. You see, it's not perfect, but it's still incredible that you can do this. I can go into X-ray view. I then see the 3D model that was created. I can then go into the top view, and I can even say, I take a look at this table here. I can measure the distance from one end to the other. It's telling me it's 2.12 meters. Right, so you can get a lot more data and take out a lot of guesswork for this kind of thing.
And there's a lot of money going into this. Like Qualcomm's got a really beautiful camera now that really picks up textures well, and Project Tango is the big Google thing. So the idea that's going to be on your phone or your iPad or whatever, this is not craziness. This is happening. This is happening.
Actually, that app just crashed. But I think that Ed will soon be digitized. So he's being computed. So I'm going to give this to Ed, and what you want to look for is for it to say, oh, you're a new person. You can click it and then move yourself around.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
So that's 3D scanning. This is kind of a lot of what I'm hired to do at Newhouse. Just look ahead and see, like, how can we then use this today, but also where is this headed, 5 to 10 years from now? I think also just letting people interact in a scene where something happened is very powerful. The fact that they can choose whether to look at something or look away, right? Do I look at the person who's being beaten, or look somewhere else? Is it working?
It's great, yeah.
You've been digitized now, okay.
That's me,
so
all right. I got to get a copy of this.
the next step is you could then print yourself out on a MakerBot if you want. So data can move from the physical world into digital and back into physical. What movie does that sound like?
Which format do I want?
Sci-fi fans? It's Tron! We're living in Tron now. So what makes it possible? Nonny talked about this a little bit. It's really emerging of technologies across different industries. I don't know if we want to turn the lights down again. Yeah, just so you can see. So from the film industry, looking, I think, 15, 20 years back, motion capture, any CGI movie pretty much uses motion capture where you have someone in a suit, they're walking around, and then you get that motion of that person. You then apply that to an avatar, the 3D model you've created. It used to cost millions of dollars to do that. Yeah, I think we need to flip it around.
We have it up here. We have it up here.
You can,
There we go.
we're good now, okay. You can now do that for just a few $100s. There's a site called Mixamo that Nonny actually told me about, where they basically rent out their motion capture studio by creating a whole bunch of different animations, people walking around, also horses and dogs, which I think is hilarious because it means they actually have horses and dogs in their mocap studio walking around in these suits. I just want to visit them just to see that for the dog day. But then you can apply that to any model. So I could, with Ed, in theory, if I got his whole body, then I could then make you pick flowers, smoke, talk on your cell phone, run, do taekwondo, and it's just by kind of drag and drop. So this is all of these technologies are coming down to our level, or mere mortal level. Gaming, obviously. So there's some software out there that's been used for games. Nonny and I both, I think, you still use Unity 3D.
Yeah, I'm starting with Unreal 4.
There's the Unity engine. There's Unreal 4. Until recently, these were all just used for games, but now they're the target platforms for virtual reality too. And I'll actually show you a little bit of that in a second. And then journalism, and so bringing facts into this. It's not just about creating fun experiences about faraway places and elves and aliens and things like that. We can actually create experiences as stories that we then let people interact with. So Nonny, of course, I actually had something in here before talking about Nonny, but I just love this. And Gadget recently called her the godmother of virtual reality. This is a picture of her actually about 2 years ago in my lab, where I convinced her to bring all her stuff out. We set it up there, and we had about 60 students go through this experience. Fast forward to today, I now have some of those students who are sophomores as seniors in a virtual reality storytelling class, where we're teaching people how to do this kind of thing. And it's a fun time. If anyone is out there thinking, oh, I'm interested in this, but I'm going to wait until all the technology comes down to, things kind of calm down, and neat little packages, and you can just do it on your iPad. If you're really interested in this is the time, I think, to get involved, because you can actually create the future of this industry, which is exciting, right? We haven't had something like this since I think the internet started. You know, arguably when the iPhone came around, right? This is another time like that. So we talked a little bit about Oculus. So Palmer Luckey, who started Oculus, he was at USC when Nonny was there, and she can tell you a lot of things about this over cookies and beers and whatever. But there are a lot of people who have been experimenting with these virtual headsets really going back 20 years. We have one such person up at the Newhouse School in the Mind Lab named Frank Biocca, who's been doing this for a long time. And so this isn't really new, but what Palmer did, and the people working on Oculus, fueled in part by Kickstarter, but really he was in his garage, just kind of pulling sensors together and trying things out, and went through many different versions of the headset. Really just nailed all the basics, and I think put a lot of focus on the sensation that people have, rather than focusing so much on the stereoscopic view that creates 3D. That's actually not the most important part of this technology. The real important part is the tracking. So as you're moving, even making minute movements like leaning forward, if you look at your peripheral vision and you notice how you can tell that there's you know, something that you're moving and you feel it, matching that as close as possible, that's what creates the illusion of presence.
And cheaply. That was his other goal. He
And inexpensively.
always has been committed to the $300, $350 headset, and as a way to democratize access. And that has been Palmer's focus all the way through.
Yeah. So a number of people, I'd say, I don't know, about 10,000 or so, Oculus DK2s have been shipped. So this is one of, we actually have two of them right here. And you can try those. You can't really buy them in a store, but you can, for the first time, get, this is the first Oculus headset. It's a Samsung Gear VR, powered by Oculus. And what's interesting is that it's a phone. So you actually just plop your phone in here, and then have the right apps, and so it's just, you know, regular phone. But once you put this in here, then it's a VR headset. So it's kind of like the Google Cardboard, but maybe the Lexus version of it. And it's very compelling. And I think we'll see a lot more things like this. I think LG is now actually shipping a plastic Google Cardboard kit along with one of its phones.
Yeah, and the Zeiss is basically the same.
The Zeiss as well.
Yeah, a slightly lower tech, but
yeah. So the Gear VR is only $250. Now you have to have that phone too, so you know, they're trying to sell phones. How these headsets work, it's basically you have a screen overlaid with two lenses. So you can kind of see it here for those who haven't seen it. You have these two lenses that are looking at a screen. And even with this Oculus, it's actually the phone from a Samsung Note 3 screen in it. It's just that the computer is a big, huge computer with a great big graphics card. When you have it in your phone, all that graphics capability is in the phone. What this means is there's really two different, the two experiences are very different. You can't do as much graphics processing on the little phones. Now, I think that over time, those graphics processors will get better, right? Because of Moore's law. On the Oculus, you know, you have this, you know, this computer and this one here. They have, you know, the best graphics cards you could possibly have. So you can do a lot with computer-generated animation. What's happening a lot in the phones now is people are experimenting a lot with 360-degree video with cameras. I'll show you some examples of that. So then the head tracking also then tricks your brain into thinking you're physically present somewhere else. And the term from research papers is presence. It's really the sensation that you have as you're present somewhere. I think a lot of people are aware that very soon after Oculus got $2.4 million for Kickstarter, then Mark Zuckerberg came in and bought it for $2 billion. I like to call that on your Facebook. So he's now a card-carrying, you know, believer. What he actually said, it was a little controversial when Facebook came in and bought them, but when I saw what he said, I saw immediately, okay, he gets it. This is not just about games. So he said, imagine you can enjoy courtside seats at a real basketball game. Just last week, the NBA just released some 360 videos in the Samsung Gear VR where you're with NBA players playing basketball. We can bring that up here. You can try it. You really feel like you're there in the court, and that you have to duck when the balls are coming towards you. And of course, they'll make lots of money with NBA. You know, it's like pay the maybe think NFL Sunday virtual ticket. I don't think we're that far from that. Studying in a classroom with students, so distance learning, consulting with the doctor face-to-face. A lot of this is about a communication platform, is what he said, and I completely agree with that. But because it's a communication platform, that really makes it a new media platform and something that should not just be something that journalists in particular should be interested in one day looking into, but this is the time more than ever for journalists to be actively engaged in creating content for this platform, because if they don't, in the absence of journalists creating content in VR, all the other uses are going to overshadow this. And we'll maybe get into this a little bit in Q&A, but there are a lot of concerns that I have, and I think Nonny shares them. A lot of us who are working in the space share these concerns. This could be very easily used for propaganda, okay? Really bordering on mind control, because if you can put somebody into an experience like that, imagine what Kim Jong-un is going to be doing with this in North Korea, or any dictator like that. Probably shouldn't have said that, because now we're going to get hacked, right? Just kidding. Other technologies come together here. So I mentioned the depth cameras. They basically can see structure, so that's what the structure sensor uses. It started with the Xbox Kinect. They now have the Kinect 2. This is essentially what they're seeing of you. We already kind of showed examples of that. This is kind of interesting. What the Kinect really sees is, this is a conference room much like this, and you can see that there are different figures in there, but it can then actually tell where your skeleton is. So it's doing skeletal tracking, and we're doing some things with that at the Newhouse School. This is sort of like a little cousin of virtual reality. Basically, immersive media walls, where we have one hallway where we've got a 48 megapixel array of high definition monitors, and people can go up and interact with information not by touching the screen, but just by moving their hands around. So this is somebody who's going through a force-directed graph. We just got that installed this year. We're working with the developer to work with our students to figure out, okay, what does it mean when media moves into our environment and our environments become smart information spaces? This is another side of immersion that we think is actually very important and kind of cousin to virtual reality. I mentioned the structure sensor. As Lisa mentioned, I spent my summer at Gannet. It was sort of this accidental thing that just kind of popped up. I happened to visit to make a little presentation about some new technologies. They invited me there, and at the end they said, hey, would you like to come and work with us, and maybe you can help us create apps for Google Glass, because that was like the big thing then, right? I said, yeah, sure, that could be kind of fun. I had family in the area. But actually, after I then brought the first Oculus, which really the image quality, I look at it now and it's like, I call it museum quality equipment now, because it's really low resolution. My Oculus One has got a lot of dust on it now. But they basically lost all interest in Google Glass and wanted to just focus the entire summer on this. So they really got it right away. And this is a little bit about what they did. And I'm not sure if this is going to, see if we have audio or what we did together. I'll just kind of talk over it. So there was a story that they were working on, a kind of enterprise level project involving this family farm in the middle of Iowa that had been in that family for about 100 years, and they were telling a story about the changes that they went through. And so as part of that, they thought, well, let's recreate the farm. It was like really ambitious, and they only had me. So it started out, and I'm not a 3D modeler, right? But my job was just to kind of figure, okay, is this possible to do? So we thought, all right, well, let's bring a 3D modeler in. So we hired somebody on contract who had just left Electronic Arts and had been working on video games like Ultima Forever and things like that, Call of Duty type games. And he loved this. He basically realized, it's like, wow, all these skills that I've developed to entertain people over time, I can actually now use to make a difference. Think of all the ways that I can make a difference in the world with this, these skills that I gained. We also then decided to pull in. So here, actually, you can see a little hazy, but that tractor. We can actually bring this up on the Oculus. He spent about 3 days 3D modeling the tractor, and it was pretty incredible if you haven't spent time with a 3D modeler to just watch what they do. He would look at things like the Google map of the space, and then it was like watching a pop-up book being built, because then he'd be building the 3D aspect. And the tractor he spent 3 days on, he even ended up 3D modeling some of the dirt inside the treads. So the CG was part of it. But also, we were interested in exploring what we could do with these 360 cameras. So there aren't really a lot of 360 cameras that you can just buy off the shelf now. The ones you can, they're usually what they call a cylindrical projection. So if you were to put this on your, the Oculus on your head, when you look at the video, you'd see a strip around you. It doesn't feel quite as immersive. But with a little bit more ingenuity, you can then take, in this case, 6 GoPro cameras, stick them in an array, and they're looking in all directions simultaneously. There's also another camera you can get. It's called the Ladybug, which is what the company we hired, Total Cinema 360, we're using. Those are the same cameras that are essentially on top of Google Street View cars to then get that data. And you then take all that, and it gets stitched together to create these videos that are projected in the sphere. But one of the interesting things about working on a 360 video shoot is, for everyone except the person holding the camera, it was incredibly boring, because there's no behind the camera. So it's not like everyone can be back there. We literally just say, okay, go hide behind a tree, go hide behind a barn or something, right? You have to get out of the picture. And I was a sound engineer for a couple days, and so I had my my headphones on, and I'd be hiding, and I couldn't really watch. I'd be peeking around. In one of the videos in that project, you can actually see me kind of going like this. So it was just interesting from a journalist perspective. Pretty soon you'll be able to buy these for just a few $100. I have one called the Gyroptic I'll hopefully be getting pretty soon. And I think it's another example of, like how long before you just have something you attach to your phone, and people will be doing this at concerts, right? To take you there, and maybe even live stream. That's on the horizon. Just want to show you just a few examples of back to what I call the transferred reality aspect of the CG. Here you've got this tractor you can see on the left, and the Domin family, and then here he is kind of building it. Some of these shots, initially it's kind of hard to tell, okay, which one is the real shot, which is the VR. So in this case you have a photo on the left, the real shot, and this is virtually recreated on the right. So there's incredible attention to detail. The person who did this, his name is Ray Soto, and he's now taken a job at Gannet to run their virtual reality journalism department. So they're actually investing in this, as many other companies like Vice Media and
It's amazing
many others, right? So
I had colleagues standing up to me not that long ago going, "You can't do that. That doesn't work." Not very long ago. It's just astonishing. That was
it's working now.
Virtual reality news departments in major news org.
So for you kids watching at home, if someone tells you that doesn't work, do it anyways. Just a few other examples here. So this is actually a really fun example for me personally, because on the right you have the virtual scene, and notice that this tire shed is kind of brown colored, and it looks like it hasn't been painted in a while. On the left, it's all white. Well, when we had photographers first go out there and take these shots, initially everything hadn't been painted in a long time. And we thought it was actually pretty interesting. This is an old farm. And then when we went out there to then shoot the 360 videos, they got very self-conscious, and they painted everything. So everything was gleaming white. And we actually had this discussion, an editorial meeting, about whether we, okay, should we change all the texture maps for the painted white buildings, or should we keep them as they were? We decided, well, it was, we modeled it the way that it was when we first went out there, so we're just going to keep it as it was. But, you get challenges like that. Here again, so this is, I think this one is actually kind of hard to tell which is real. This looks slightly more cartoony, but it's very detail-oriented. So what are the kind of stories can be experienced? I have a lot of different ideas, and I have a class that I'm teaching called Virtual Reality Storytelling. One is environmental stories, I think, where you could do things like import topography of coastal areas. I'm actually working on this in different areas right now, and then you can show what the sea level rise is going to do to that area. That's actually really straightforward. The only reason I haven't done it yet is because I want to make sure I'm doing it right, work with the right scientists. 5 minutes. Science and medical stories, you could see how a new cancer drug works from the inside out, right? So it's kind of like, what was that movie, Fantastic Voyage? Right? Everyone can have their own Fantastic Voyage. 3D data visualizations, you know, are we in polar vortex 2.0 now? You know, does anyone know what polar vortex looks like? Well, now you could actually go inside of it and see what's around you. So it doesn't have to, I think there's a lot of science and environmental stories you could do. And then crime scenes, I have a lot of students interested in those. I'm personally not my passion, but you could actually go, if you have something like, you know, the next big O.J. Simpson trial, everyone could go and kind of see all the different details and explore. I mentioned I have a class that I'm teaching, virtual reality storytelling. If you go to vrstorytelling.org, I'm Creative Commons licensing everything so anyone can use it with attribution. And I encourage that because this area is changing so fast. We need more people out there learning about it, sharing what they're learning, which Nonny did for me and I'm doing with others. And we all, you know, it's a very sharing group of people who are working in this space. And we learn so much from each other and are inspired. Last but not least, I just want to show you very quickly. This is my latest thing I'm working on. There's an artist down in Fort Lauderdale named George Gadson. I was talking to some arts journalists down there, and I asked him if I could go around with my 3D scanner and scan some of his creations, and then interview him. And he said, "Sure, this is, you know, kind of interesting." So what we ended up doing is creating. Let's see if I can.
I evolved into my career as an artist.
So basically,
I went to Duke University.
I've got I'm building a virtual version of his art gallery. I haven't built the walls yet. That's actually the easiest part. You can see over here, I've got a 3D scan of him. And as you move around in the Oculus Rift, you kind of hear him moving around you. This is a scan of a sculpture of himself that he made when he was 3 years old. And so he talks about that a little bit. And then over this way is a sculpture he did called the African Queen. So you can kind of move around through it. And I think that, you know, this is another, for arts journalists in particular, this is another way to kind of, you know, tell a story, in this case, about artists. I think in the same way you could do things with musicians where they could get, you know, help. If you're, you know, covering bands, you could then go with 360 cameras and then you'll start seeing this, I think, in a lot of places. YouTube is actually adding a whole 360 video channel pretty soon here. But just so you can see, right here, this is Unity 3D. These are all 3D objects, and this software is free. So if you're interested in experimenting with VR, just go to unity3d.com. You can download it. If you go to my VR storytelling site, I have a list of resources there. This is not an expensive area to get into yet, right? I think eventually it could be. So this is the time to really learn about things. So.
And there, oh, by the way, there's also like a lot of programs now for quick facial capture going on, like Face Shift, where you just, you know, perform and it'll map it onto the character for you, and then you can bring that into, so that, you know, many things like Mixamo and Face Shift and stuff are trying to automate the process of creating natural animations. So.
Yeah. Well.
So it's pretty. It's
pretty
exciting. It's pretty exciting to. It's happening really fast, and to me, it's and Dan, it's all about like what are the best practices for this space. Like the technical issues that we are talking about now that might seem sort of, you know, like they're just starting, they're going to get solved. There are people working on these night and day. I mean, $2 billion was a big motivation for a lot of people to get involved in this system, and I think it's now a matter of really the storytellers to start thinking about how do we do a spatial narrative? What does that mean when somebody can look wherever they want to? You know. Those are big questions.
Well,
so yeah, so I think now if we've got time for a few questions, and then what we were hoping to do is to get you all playing with the stuff that we have here. So we'll do a few questions, and then we'll move to demos. You know, most of these are things that we have to use, you know, one person at a time, but we've got a lot of different things here, so we can get people trying out different things.
Any burning questions out there or insights?
Well, I've got a couple. So after this project, is Gannet going to go any farther with it, do you think?
Yeah, you know, Gannet has already done their second project. It's they put 360 cameras on the U.S. women's ski team, and they got their time trials at Vail. And that was kind of interesting because you're moving really fast down the mountain, but you really feel like you're skiing. And they're working on a third, but they haven't shared what that is yet.
So I'm just going to go ahead and say what I say often, which is, if I was to offer a thought about making this stuff, I wouldn't put a camera on something moving fast, because
I would agree with that.
It's an embodied experience. Your body feels like it's there. So if you're kind of whipping people through something, but their body isn't really whipping through anything, it's sitting right here.
There'll be some cognitive dissonance.
It's a disconnect that can cause nausea. I know I'm super susceptible to it, so I am very cautious about how we can do motions. Slower movements seem to work pretty well, like, very successful, I have to tell you, interesting space projects. So you're dealing with gravity, the no gravity in space stuff, the floating around like that, or pieces like that. So you can do movement. It's not like you can't do it at all, but sometimes you have to really think about what does that mean for, watching somebody whip by you from several angles. I think could equally.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I agree with you. I did not work on the ski project.
It is a new field, and we haven't figured out the language.
What bothers me about this is the journalism application. Boy, Brian Williams could have saved his butt if he but
no, on the other hand,
so much in journalism that I am so skeptical.
I think we were laughing about doing doing his story. So you're in the helicopter with him, and then nothing happens. And then nothing happens, right? Sorry, that was our take on how to make it in VR.
That'd be pretty boring
Sorry.
for you, yeah.
Sorry.
But the sensational aspect of being injected into a news event, particularly when it's victimizing someone, whether it be a police officer or a member of the military, just taps into our emotions and wants to form an opinion based upon sensation, and that's uncomfortable. It's not objective.
But I mean, you understand that people did witness those events,
Yeah,
right?
but
So is that sensational?
But if I were there in that situation with my own eyes, I'd say, okay, and am I perceiving really what's going on here correctly? But with all this digitization in between me and it only makes me want to be more skeptical.
But I think maybe the assumption is that people will only want to enter those experiences because they want to get a thrill. And I think that as a journalist, you have to start from the assumption that people want to be informed about something, that they really care deeply about the fact that we're putting people into, Guantanamo Bay, and they don't have, they really have no rights, right? Because that could be anybody, or that, police brutality. So I understand, though, that there is always the potential, and not just with journalists, with anybody, to use any of these technologies, even just including regular multimedia, for good or for evil, right? Or for responsibly or irresponsibly. And we need to have people who are committed to responsibly informing people in a democracy engage in this now, so that doesn't happen, what you're talking about.
Because we have film has a long history of propaganda, right?
Do we have those people that we can depend on now?
I
think it's debatable.
I think we do, and then we have some who are not, right? We can't.
But
they're falling out of favor, right? So, but that
that
does not mean that we should not be doing it.
Or when somebody like Brian Williams does do something like this, it causes a huge uproar, right? So I think that's a good thing, right? That there is an uproar about what's ethical and what's correct. But I think it's important in these things. I mean, as I said, film has been used for propaganda since it started. Posters, we had tons of posters, text-based propaganda. That's nothing new. The question is, how do we teach our audience members, because guaranteed this is going to happen. So how do we teach our audience members to have critical thinking about what they're experiencing? So indeed they are able to question the authenticity, the accuracy. I think that's equally important. Do I try to use my best practices journalistically and bring it to bear when I make these pieces? Yes. But am I human? Yes. Might I make mistakes? Sure. What's transparency in these environments? Very important question. How do we say where our source material comes from? Where did we get this stuff? That's something I feel like I still don't know, because when you're in the VR space, it's undivided attention. You got those goggles on, and you're not clicking away at anything. You're not on the phone. You're not talking to your friends. I mean, that's a good thing about a storyteller's perspective. But how do we then define the transparency for, showing in a significant way where we're getting our information from, which I think is a very important piece of this. So I'm not denying that that's not an issue. But I can also tell you, my kids are very comfortable with the digital representations of themselves. They are on Minecraft, they are in other virtual worlds, and they are not reading the newspaper. And if we want to continue to have informed citizenry, we have to consider with what these platforms can offer to educate and inform. So there's my back and forth on this. I'm not disregarding your point, because I think it's crucial that we consider it.
It's great for entertainment value, but I remain real skeptical about the journalistic.
Skepticism is actually a journalistic value, so I agree with that. Any other questions?
Other questions?
I just have a thought. I had no idea what this was, so I'm a conventional writer, and I have two thoughts. One is, what happens to people who are sensitive emotionally?
Sure.
And they get thrown into, I mean, we have a PSTD everywhere,
Sure.
you know,
Yep.
and now, if they don't really know what's going to happen, a lot of people react to that as if they're there and they experience trauma.
Well, I know it's something that I'm really concerned about myself, so I can tell you in this VR storytelling class, I have all these students much younger than me. What a lot of them want to do, there's different experiences you can download. They want to download these horror movie type experiences and really traumatic things. And I always tell them, we don't really know what the long-term effects will be of these, very visceral experiential media forms. And if you go into something that that is that dramatic, just be aware that, because I know this actually happened to me when I went through Hunger in Los Angeles. You're going to have memories of having been there, and they're going to feel more real than anything that you remember from watching a movie. And
Which
for
means that the hungry who have been invisible in this country are also more visible, right? So that's the other side of that coin,
yes,
right?
I'm not saying it's bad that I remember that.
No, I'm not just saying it. I
So-
always warn people before they go in.
Yeah.
Always warn people. This is the content. It is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to do this? BuzzFeed did not do that. That was their decision of their people, right, for their employees. I ethically was opposed to that in the room. It's like, we have to tell people that no, they're okay with this. We're going to be able to do it this way. So,
Yeah.
I tend to try to at least give people some
So they can make that choice.
to do it or not do it.
And I don't mind that I have
We're
memories
talking
of.
about people, you're not talking about children. For years we've known the effects of violent films and episodes on children, and especially boys, they come out
Sure.
and kick the cat after they see
See, I don't mind that I have memories of being in the food line, because I have a different understanding of the homeless now. It is actually very positive, right? Where I'm actually giving to homeless organizations and volunteering more after I went through that, and getting my kids involved too. But when I'm talking about some of these horror experiences, I'm talking about like horror movie makers creating really, gruesome things, and then I refuse to go into them. So my students, I give them these warnings, and I tell them, just be aware, you could have these, this could affect you in ways that other media hasn't in the past. You may want to decide whether or not you want to go into that. Of course, most of them say, yeah, I want to go in. But I had a very interesting case of one student who ended up dropping my class over this, where I had them all go through different VR experiences to understand the technology. And one of them went into the middle of a Cirque du Soleil show, which is actually, I think, pretty compelling video. You feel like you're on the stage. This particular student had a real fear of clowns, like, I mean, medically, diagnosed
Phobia.
everything, a phobia, right? And she blogged about this, and I mean, of all the feedback, it was the most interesting to me, because I hadn't really thought about that before, that, somebody could, if they need to understand what they're going to experience going in, because you never know what their issues will be. This goes far beyond just the subject matter, and the fact that that there's this new technology involved. You feel like you're there, you feel present, and you need to know that you're going somewhere, you're being transported somewhere. So if you wouldn't want to go to that clown show because you're afraid of clowns, you probably don't want to go in the experience, right? I think we're kind of saying the same thing.
Although it's true that for the past like 10 or 15 years, they've also used VR to treat phobias.
Yes.
So
It's also been the opposite success, very successfully for pain. Like there's a ton of really amazing stuff on like children having their burn wounds change, severe burn wounds change, and we're in the VR space. We're doing things like as a penguin sliding down snow and hills and ice, and they will report like a practically pain-free bandage change compared to just screaming, yelling, and pain. And obviously, you can say again how this could be used to manipulate minds, but there are really positive uses of this as well. Yeah, in the back of the room or something.
Yeah. First of all, I think this is all really amazing. Nonny, I have a question for you. Were you expecting, like, when you graduated or early in your career, that you'd be on the forefront of innovation of virtual reality, or what were you expecting of yourself?
You planned it all out, didn't you?
That's interesting. I've never asked me that question. You know that? You know, I was a correspondent for Newsweek, so I did print journalism, pretty traditional stuff, right? And but the itch wasn't scratched. And I did film, and the itch wasn't scratched. And you know, in the '90s, I taught myself HTML, and I was like, you know, I won this great award early on from CompuServe, and you remember that for, you know, the best use of their technology for doing a big piece on Chappaquiddick in a documented film and using their databases for research. I mean, I just was always drawn to computers. But I in no way realized that this was going to be, you know, about being an innovator or whatever. It has not been an easy road, right? I had to, you know, I was literally had been a research fellow in the journalism school at U.S.C., but the director Geneva Overhoser left, and my fellowship ended, and you know, people thought I was doing some really weird stuff, and I was ended up for a year just doing this, barely surviving to kind of do it, but I definitely I see how effective it can be for telling these stories that, you know, of people who don't have a voice, and I think that was always important in my other work too. Like that's, I think, a part of the journalistic. For me, the underdog has always been really important. I didn't expect to kind of end up being an underdog myself at the time, but it's been obviously extraordinary, and it is a before and after the sale. I have no complaints now. The sale. Once Oculus was sold for $2 billion, then everything changed, right?
People took it more seriously.
Suddenly I had, you know, but which was great, because now, you know, we know when you get crowdsourcing what it can do to anything, right? When a lot of minds start hammering on something, big things can happen. And I'm really thrilled to be seeing that it is going out there in the world now, you know. But honestly, and if there's just that other little kind of weird thing of being a woman in tech, right? Which I could go on and on about too. Not for this. Not for this day.
You were first. I just want to say to everybody out there. So let history show. Nonny was first at this. Because some guy would try to say he was first.
For better or for worse.
Just one last question. Do you see this as ultimately the end of journalistic literacy, the writing of a story and trying to bring someone into it? Or
I don't see that at all.
As an adjunct, to supplement what?
No, on the contrary, it's just another platform. You know, radio and television are different. They do different things, and we still have incredible radio, right? There should have been this point where radio was over with, right? Because we had TV. But in fact, you know, as things like Serial Podcast show, oh my God, radio can be brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this is just another platform. And if we don't have to worry about it in that way, if it's going to take over the world, even though I know that gaming is such a divide at the moment still, for generations, like the way that, you know, Elvis Presley's dances used to be or something. I think that it shouldn't be seen that way. I think that people are going to find each one of the mediums are going to continue.
If I could just add, so I have kids who use Minecraft too, and I've got 2 girls, a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old. The 9-year-old, the other day, I saw her typing a lot while she's in her virtual world, all right? And I asked her what she's typing, and I look, and she's been writing a book inside her Minecraft world. You can use what's called scrolls. So I think that kind of answers that question for me. These virtual environments that the next generation they're living it right now. If you look at the stats in Minecraft, this is a major force for change in our world right now. They're all going to be using technologies like this, but I think it's really a form of self-expression in a lot of ways. And they, you know, at the end of the day, what makes this technology exciting is that you can feel physically present somewhere, but it's not long before you can then also feel physically present next to someone, and you're communicating, which is why it's a communication platform. And one of the best ways to communicate is still by writing things down That's I don't think that's
I-
going
so
away.
it's
This will like we may see a whole new realm of Minecraft. You know,
Yeah, my
ebook
daughter
makers.
spends hours writing stories in her virtual spaces as well. But in this storytell, it's just if my son was in the living room on Minecraft on his computer, and my daughter walked in from my garage office into the living room, and my son looked up and said, "Why did you leave?" You know, she just walked in, but she just left the server, right?
It's very
And it was like,
surreal.
yeah.
Being a
So
parent
what
these
does it
days.
mean to have shared experience? That's going to be interesting too, of what that's all going to look like, and. You know, it's just, again, it's just another interesting platform. And I call it a duality of presence. You know you're still here. It just does this weird thing of making you feel like you're there too. It's not like you're like, oh, I've forgotten who I am in this space, or that's all gone, and, you know, it's not like that. But it is a weird split. And I've had people put on the goggles and like, when I do these big walk around, we can just walk around freely worlds, and so you don't have to have controllers or anything like that. So it really goes one to one with your movement and motion. And I've had people put on the goggles and they'll gasp, literally. They just go, oh,
It's a
because
holodeck.
suddenly they've been taken somewhere else. But they know they're still here. Believe me, they do.
So, just because I know people are on tight schedules, let's move to the
Demos.
Okay,
demos.
all right.
Yeah. So,
Thanks very much.
so we have 2 Oculus Rift rigs, and then we have a bunch of other equipment here. So, just
Remember
let
we were
me
gonna
say
put in.
thank you.
Oh, we have to.